The year was 1999. Unreal Tournament and Quake 3 were dueling to decide the fate of the arena shooter while people still cared about the arena shooter. System Shock 2 was redefining the immersive sim before Deus Ex would redefine it again. Age of Empires 2 was well on its way to making millions of kids obsessed for the rest of their lives with medieval warfare. Homeworld was showing us the third dimension of the real-time strategy genre, and Planescape Torment was bending minds. And somewhere in that sea of amazing video games, a company called Sirtech was about to release its magnum opus. Well, one of them. They did make Wizardry as well, so they had a lot of opus to magnize, if you will. Jagged Alliance 2 was released in April of 1999, and it was a gigantic success for a couple of months, mostly in Germany. Today we know it as a cult classic, which is a term we use to define games that utterly failed upon release in terms of sales because people just didn't care about them, didn't play them, didn't get them, or were too stupid to actually discern what the game was about. And due to its status as a cult classic, people have tried to remaster, remake it, re-envision it for many years. And this month, it's getting a sequel. And hopefully, the curse will be broken and this sequel will be actually good. Not that the previous attempts were bad, but they weren't good. They weren't this good. You see, Jagged Alliance 2 is a fine game, but it is a game that was part of a genre that upon its release didn't exist anymore. The turn-based tactical game. The setup for the Jagged Alliance series is quite simple. You play as the head of a mercenary organization. You get hired to do a job, usually one very specific job, guerrilla warfare, whether it's on behalf of some scientists or on behalf of the former president of a country. You hire a few mercs off the internet, you equip them, you make sure you have enough money, and you make sure they don't try to shoot each other as you mow down the enemy in your path. Taking over square by square of a large map that's well worth exploring even if you don't have anybody to fight. It's a simple formula, you may say, but when done well it is far from simple. And Jagged Alliance 2 did it very well. You set out for the nation of Orulco, rich in mineral resources, colorful characters...
You stalking me? You know, I keep a log of everything you do, so watch your step.
Idiots named Elliot.
I am an idiot.
And despots that came in from Romania. The main villain of the game, Adriana Reitman, is probably one of the most famous Romanians in video games, alongside Agent 47 and half the goons in most crime-based Eastern European shooters. She was built in the same vein as Elena Ceausescu, whom some may know as that moron who gave herself the title of Doctor but didn't know what CO2 meant. She also did a lot of murders, same as her game counterpart, Adriana. As villains go, she's perfect. She's someone who you just want to kill. The game will do its best to inform you as to the status of her mental faculties as your campaign progresses. You'll have these short cinematics that just show you how she's dealing with you taking over more and more land and destroying her armies. She'll get progressively more unhinged, slapping the crap out of her aide Elliot, the village idiot.
Elliot! You idiot! Idiot!
In a way that really makes you connect with her. That's something that a lot of games tend to fail at, honestly. They show you the villain maybe once, maybe twice. You get to meet them and some dialogue and then they just vanish. But here you get to see what she's doing basically all the time. And you get to mess with her. You can order flowers for her and she will go ballistic when she gets them. And hey, if ever your mercenaries get captured, she'll be right there as they're being tortured for information. Basically, everybody in the country hates her apart from the rich yabos and the town on the coast. And you're in charge of the militia, the mercenary force, the private army that's out there to kill her and everybody who's considering themselves her ally. And even Elliot, who in spite of being brutalized to the point where his avatar changes to look more and more battered as you gain progress in the game, will still support her to the end.
Elliot, you idiot!
Now sure, you can choose to not kill him, because the game gives you such options and certain conditions. What you do in the game is influenced to a point by who you're playing with, or who you're playing as to be more precise. This isn't XCOM. In XCOM, you've got a bunch of goons basically. They're all interchangeable, yeah, they may have different stats, but they don't have unique personalities. The personality is something that you assign to them. In Jagged Alliance, no. In Jagged Alliance, these are people, and they'll make sure you know that. Some of them are racist, some of them are sexist, some of them are absolutely hammered half the time you're playing with them. Some of them won't even want to work for you because you hired their ex-wife. Others are really excited to do the killing. Some of them are just trying to do a good deed for the people of the nation and you keep getting them killed. Some of them will die if they come in contact with water. Some of them just go insane and spray bullets all over the place because they want to. They've seen so much blood, their own blood, when you broke them out of prison. Their minds were already snapped and now all they know is murder. And all these characters, these dozens and dozens and dozens of characters, will interact with each other verbally. They'll praise each other. They'll say, that guy sucks. If he's not out of the group by the time my contract expires, I'm not coming back. The first Jagged Alliance had this as well, but here it's driven up to 11. This is how you do a turn-based tactics game with personalities, with actual characters. It makes you look at the rebooted XCOM game and think to yourself, wow, so much praise was heaped upon its characters and how, oh, they are blank slates intentionally in an absolutely Machiavellian scheme to get you to project personalities upon them. This is brilliance. No, this is brilliance. This is hard work and brilliance. All these characters have backstories. All of these characters have likes and dislikes and relations. They have quotes, audible, vocal quotes for basically everything you can imagine. From getting shot in the face to seeing a giant mutated bug.
A holy lucky strike! That looks like the worm at bottom of tequila bottle.
I'll get to that in a moment. There is history here. There is depth here. This is world building and storytelling that is masterfully crafted. You even get to see what happens to some of the old mercenaries from Jagged Alliance 1 that aren't playable. Turns out some of them got killed by random groupie, a stalker, crazed fan while they were coming back from getting groceries. And some of them are just nuts. They'll even have reactions to seeing one of their own in the field working against them. Some will be sad, some will be frightened, some will say,
All right, a chance to kill Mike.
This gives Jagged Alliance 2 a layer of immersion that most other games of this kind just don't really succeed at grasping. I would say it's the cornerstone of what makes Jagged Alliance 2 Jagged Alliance 2, or the entire series for that matter. It's also really nice that the characters are from all over the place. They're not all American. There's a reason this sold well in Germany. A lot of the characters are German. A lot of them are from the former USSR and they speak Russian. That's probably one of the reasons why it was so popular in this neck of the woods. Representation matters. Well, maybe in a broader sense than whatever Americans are doing these days. Okay, so you have your mercs. Well, you will have them once you navigate to the AIM website. This game was made in the age where the internet seemed like it was the next big thing, and not the downfall of civilization. So you had your laptop and you could navigate through the web a bit. Honestly, this part of the game seems like it could have been a bit more fleshed out. The laptop is, although it's used a lot more than the first game, it still has components like files that aren't really used all that much. And neither is the browser. You have your gun shop, your florist, your mortuary, your respectable mercenary agency, the cheap dime store knockoff mercenary agency, and your insurance provider in case you get people killed. They could have done more. I hope in the sequel they do more. That's where you spend about a quarter of your time. The other time you spend rummaging around the world map, trying to investigate each and every square because you just know somewhere in one of those squares there's a hidden quest. There's a hidden NPC somewhere in a shack in a desert. There are some hidden items. There's something that'll give you that edge over the army. Or maybe there's just more army and more blood cats, which are very, very nasty big lion tiger type things that will chew you to death. Or chew the army to death. They don't really seem to mind either of you as a lunch. The other quarter of the game will be spent in inventory menus trying to piece together who has what kind of ammo and what kind of weapons, because you ticked the give me all the guns feature when starting a new game. You could have ticked the yeah, just have a normal amount of guns. I mean, who cares if that's a MIDI and that's a Dragunov and that's an M24. Just give me a sniper rifle. No. You wanted all the guns with all the types of ammo. And now you don't know which is which. Thankfully, if you do mouse over a weapon, the ammo used by it will be highlighted. It had, to its credit, a bunch of really good quality of life features. Stuff that games that came out a decade later didn't have, like a button which will tell you if you're in cover if you mouse over a point, or what's your field of view at that point, or how far a target is. It didn't, however, tell you one thing, and it didn't do it so you wouldn't get mad. The game never tells you what your chance to hit is. The last quarter of the game that you spend will be in battle. And if this game had a percentage to hit indicator, you would have gone insane at some point. But there isn't one. One of the mods slash remakes slash remasters adds one, but I don't think it's all that useful here. When you shoot somebody, you have the option of choosing how many action points you want to use to aim. The action points are a representation of how quickly your character can act in a given 5-second interval. The more agile they are, the more they can do in that 5-second interval. And choosing to spend action points to spend time to aim will increase your odds of actually hitting your target. Sometimes. Near the end, things seem to go really badly for some reason, but still, not having that indicator really leads you to believe that the ballistics calculations in the background are doing something, because you can miss, and when you miss, there is a good chance you hit somebody or something else. There's a good chance you just leveled half a building because you hit some munition storage or some oxygen tank storage. Or maybe you just broke a window and now the enemy who was inside the house sees you quite clearly. Line of sight is magnificently made in this game, especially at night. You can do all sorts of sneaky things at night, especially if you have silencers on your pistols and use throwing knives and machetes. You can even cut off people's heads to prove that you headhunted them for a bounty hunter who shows up randomly on the map, and you may miss him the first time you play the game. There's a beauty here in its tactics, although it does get really bogged down near the end where you have to kind of, you will need to field 2, maybe 3 teams at once and have them all converge on a single square at the enemy fortress, battling tanks and all sorts of other contraptions. And that's where it does feel like it gets a bit too slow, too convoluted. But up until then, it is one of the finest turn-based tactics games out there, even today. It's got aim shots. You can shoot people in the groin, sadly. And the effects aren't really what you would call amazing. I mean, you can't shoot a gun out of somebody's hand, but that will happen from time to time. Shooting somebody in the leg hard enough will cause them to fall over. Throwing a stun grenade at somebody will cause them to keel over and need a round or two to get their breath back. Standing in tear gas, not a good idea. Standing in mustard gas, worse idea. standing under a mortar that's falling towards you, or in front of a rocket launcher, or behind one. Also, not a great idea. Neither is going into an infested mine because you chose to play on the sci-fi game mode, which adds other dangers. Dangers that you hear about when somebody mentions dead bodies going missing. The original version of the game, I can say, was a lot of fun. The combat really was good, and it felt rewarding because, well, the enemies weren't what you would call masterfully intelligent, but they could be assholes about it. If you attacked a region and could find sufficient cover behind the building, all the enemies would just run a conga line towards you and you could snipe them or catch them at a choke point and kill them all quite easily. Apart from one or two, there would always be those bastards who would hide somewhere in a corner with a semi-automatic weapon, not moving at all and just killing instantly anybody who got in their way because the game had an interrupt system. If your characters or the enemy characters had enough action points left over on their turn, whenever an opponent walked in their field of view, they'd be dead. So at that point you would be creative. You would use stun grenades and throw them over corners, or maybe go around the other side of the building and blow the building up, provided you knew where the rocket launchers were, and you calculated how many of them you would need for the inevitable battle against the tanks. Oh, those goddamn tanks. There are vehicles in the game, and none of them are actually drivable in the same sense they would be 2 years later in Fallout Tactics, but they are means to cross the map. There's even an ice cream van somewhere, or a Humvee, but mostly you'd be using the chopper. The tanks, however, the enemy has them. The enemy will use them against you. Thankfully, they can't move, so you can maybe mortar them out of commission before trying to get up close and hucking a grenade at them. Or if you are lucky, or maybe a master tactician, you could use those tanks against the enemy itself. Not because you could control the tanks, but because sometimes the tanks would misfire and, shoot their own people. That's one of the aspects I loved about this game. It was fair. You weren't the only one that could miss. Everybody could. And the consequences could be disastrous. Maybe not at the same level of a critical fail in Fallout, but seeing enemies blow themselves up never gets old. It never gets old. Seeing your team constantly get blown up by some guy who is on top of a roof with a mortar does get old, however. It gets really old. Thankfully, the game offers the Iron Man mode as an optional feature. It doesn't ram it down your throat. It gives you a lot of options, actually, in terms of how you would like the battles to progress, if you would like them to be easier or not, if you would like to have, again, a lot of goddamn guns, if you want some sci-fi elements, if you want confirmations on your clicks, if you want to illuminate your commandos in combat because you can't see them that well in the darkness. And the various mods just add to that so much. Choice really is the name of the game. This isn't just combat encounter after combat encounter. You explore non-combat areas, or as non-combat as they can be, until you decide to open fire on civilians because they're assholes towards you. But not all your soldiers will comply with these orders. Some of them will outright refuse to shoot a civilian, even if that civilian is being a total dick. Why would they? It's their neighbor. It's maybe their friend who still owes them money. And hey, instead of shooting people, maybe try to recruit them to your side. Maybe that will unlock some quests, some new rewards. Maybe together you can go out and rob a local kingpin, who will then send assassins after you. What I really have to say that I liked about Jagged Alliance is it doesn't overstay its welcome. A lot of games of this type may sometimes feel a bit bloated, a bit too much. Like they're trying to carry more weight than their mechanics and their theme than their everything can actually support. Wasteland 2 was an example of such a game. The combat got boring after the first giant badger. Even in the director's cut, it wasn't good enough. They fixed that in the third game. Jagged Alliance 2, apart from near the end, like the actual final assault when you'd have to control and deploy multiple teams simultaneously with really slow progress. Apart from that, it was just excitement all around at every corner. Okay, sure, maybe the army constantly coming and trying to capture the places you already had taken over got a bit tiresome until you trained up enough militia to withstand the attack. But apart from that, that really didn't last much. The army would eventually realize it can't really do much against you and not hit you so hard. The game was fun, and much like any good fun game, on occasion when you'd shoot somebody in the face or in the chest and you scored a critical, their head would explode or they'd go flying off or burst into flames or whatever happens to people when they fall off roofs and do that somersault thing. There was a lot of care and attention put into this game. Sure, it's not perfect, it does have some flaws, some bugs, sometimes the pathfinding will just go borka and you'll have to exit the game because an enemy got lost or one of your characters can't figure out how to jump over a fence and the whole thing is soft locked. But you have a save feature for that unless you're playing in Iron Man mode because you're some sadist. And there's the 1.13 mod, there's the whatever it's called, the engine reimplementation. There's 2 expansions as well that really weren't really as good. And there's the plethora of semi-sequels and remakes that came out since then who, well, we don't talk about them much. I used to play Jagged Alliance online simply because it was made in Unity and could run on a browser. Wasn't that good, but it wasn't terrible either. And hey, who knows? Maybe the next game that's coming out it's gonna be good. And even if it's not, we still have Jagged Alliance 2. A cult classic that is remembered somewhat to a lesser degree by the planetary consciousness than its contemporaries, such as the classic Pepsi Man and the legendary Crash Team Racing. But I mean, it came out the same year as Heroes 3, and that basically ate up everybody's time when it came to turn-based games anyway. Had it been released maybe a year earlier, maybe 2, it would have had much better odds of selling, of being competitive in a market that was now flooded with games that brought more dynamism to their tactics. This was after Commandos, the game that defined what a real-time tactics title could do. This was after Baldur's Gate and its active pause battle system showed us that we didn't have to contend with turn-based where it'd take like a half an hour for an enemy to finish their turn because there were 50 of them, goddamn little tiny spiders all over the map. It was in the age of the RTS. It was in the age of fast-paced action. An age where the concept of you rolling into a map with 18 characters and having to fight about 20 enemies, all of them moving one by one, kind of made you feel like, no, I don't want to play something like that. Why would I? Look, Baldur's Gate, I can just tell these guys to go there and everybody's acting at the same time. Look, XCOM's doing it with Apocalypse as well. And 2 years later, Fallout Tactics would do the exact same thing. With a lot of similarities actually, though to be fair, there were similarities between Fallout and the Jagged Alliance in general, because they were kind of part of the same subgenre. Had it come before this, had it used an active pause battle system, maybe it would have had more success. Maybe, who knows, Sirtech would have not imploded. Well, no, it still would have imploded because Sirtech closed due to the entire system through which PC games were being sold was an absolute sham. Matt Barton's channel, Matt Chat, has an interview with the founder of Sirtech where he goes into detail about how retailers destroyed PC gaming because they could. So make sure to check that out after watching this video. A video about the little game that could, that did, and for many, still does.